my strength and my salvation. Amen. Would you please be seated? It has been a very, very busy, exciting week. I mean, the season here in the Canto is kicking off. Look at the place, it's packed, and we're not even in February. All the snowbirds are starting to return. Yesterday we had a funeral, today we have a baptism, we have all sorts of activities in the week to come. God is just doing wonderful things at this church, in spite of the fact that I'm here. Oh, I'll give you some of the magicians should never tell how they do their tricks, and priests should never let people know how disaster was averted. Well, yesterday, Janet Fontaine and I did a funeral, and disaster was averted. What am I talking about? There are times when if something is going to go wrong, it will go wrong, and it will continue to go wrong. The funeral yesterday was for a 90-year-old man whom I'd never met. He goes to another Episcopal church, and they declined to bury him, so they asked if we would do it. And I said, sure. That's part of our culture here. We're a very open church to people. We try to meet people where they are and support them. So I didn't know the family. I hadn't really had time to get to know anybody. And I come to the service, and I meet the widow for the first time, and I'm looking over the bulletin. And the first thing I notice is that the man who died was 990 years old. And on the top, it said he was born in September 1026. And I'm thinking, this guy must have had a wonderful life. He knew everybody. And I'm looking through the bulletin, and it says, okay, I'm going to give a sermon, and then a fellow is going to give a eulogy, a man named Daniel Gerald. And in the front row, see, right here, was this it's a man who was not from around here. Let me put it that way. Very elegantly dressed, lovely, made-to-measure suit, shoes that put mine to shame. Very sophisticated, cultured man sitting in the front row, and he stands up before the service and says, it says I'm giving the eulogy. What's that? And I said, I don't know. So you're not planning on talking 15 to 20 minutes. I was going to say a few words about my uncle, but maybe 1 or 2 minutes. I said, okay, then I guess I got about 15 minutes I had to fill in. Well, the service took off, and beside the fact, Susan, my wife's not here, she was the usher. And you're supposed to bring down the elements after, in the middle so that I can consecrate them. She forgot. Well, I forgot to remind her. So we start the Holy Communion, and I look down, there's nothing there. And so I sort of motion to Jen, out of the side of my mouth, go into the closet. And so I sort of prolong the ship. Well, why do I have children serve at the altar? Because they make me look good. You look at them, and you don't see my mistakes, you look at their mistakes. Well, the service went fine, everything went fine. We pulled through all the mistakes, and Daniel Gerald, the man listed in the program, got up to give us a few minutes to talk. And he was seated with his wife, and I'm seated up here, and I'm thinking, I know that guy's voice. I know that guy's voice. And I look at him and I go, I know him. And I know his wife, but where do I know them from? And so this is all shooting through my head. Then it's my turn to preach for 15 minutes, which is not a good way to start your sermon, trying to figure out, do I owe him money? Where have I seen this guy before? Well, after the service, I said to him, tell me, I do know you, I recognize your voice. How do I know? He said, well, I'm an actor. And I said, and I got it. It clicked. I love these books on tape. Daniel Gerald narrates many of the books on tape that I love, especially these mysteries by a man named Alan First. He's a British actor. Do you remember the movie Chariots of Fire? Yeah. You remember there were the 4 Cambridge College students? One was Harold Abraham, the Jew, Jewish fellow, and then there was the Lord, and then there were 2 other fellows, both had blonde hair. This was one of those other 2 guys. This is somebody you see every year on Masterpiece Theatre. He's one of those British actors that you see everywhere but have no clue what his name is. He's always somebody's brother, or and his wife. It then clicked on where I saw her before. Now, ladies, I'm going to tell you a secret. Your husbands have never told you this. But it's a well-known fact that when people are first married, husbands will watch TV shows that they are ashamed to admit to everyone watched because their wives want to. I can now, 25 years later, admit to having seen Melrose Place. If you asked me at the time, I would have refused to even acknowledge I knew it existed. But we had one TV, and I loved my wife, therefore I had to sit next to her and watch certain TV shows. One of them was called 30-something, and I think I saw every episode. And this woman was one of the series stars of 30-something, but I couldn't admit to the fact that I knew her, because then that would have admitted that I actually watched the show. So, friends, our little town of Lecanto has been graced by Hollywood royalty. TV actors and actresses coming to pay tribute to the man's uncle. And he gave, he was a very clever man. He got up and said, well, I'm a half-Jewish socialist, and therefore I don't know if I'm welcome in an Episcopal church. And I, being clever, said, well, our Lord was a half-Jewish socialist. So you're welcome, of course. And he gave a sermon, and he talked about his uncle. And what was, for me, wonderful, because he hit upon the whole Christian purpose of a memorial service and a funeral. Today, we're going to baptize Blake. Blake is today publicly becoming part of the family of Christians. He's not being baptized as an Episcopalian. He's being baptized as a Christian. Poor fellow, in 12 years, he's going to be in confirmation class. And then we're going to get him as an Episcopalian. But he is entering that fraternity, that brotherhood, that group of people surrounded by each other who are what we call the communion of saints. Christians past, Christians present, Christians in the future, who are all gathered around our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, giving him honor and worship. And Blake's baptism will signify his justification in faith, by faith in Jesus Christ. His godparents, his parents would make vows on his behalf, stating and affirming their belief in Jesus Christ as Lord. But you know, it doesn't stop there. This baptism is a symbol of the beginning. It's not the end. Blake's Christian life, your Christian life, continues day by day, and that Christian walk is what we call sanctification. It's that walk towards holiness. In other words, you, over time, walk closer and closer to the Lord, understanding these things. There was this TV show I used to love in the 80s, one of the shows that Susan will never admit to having seen. And it was called Black Adder. And there was a scene where Black Adder is become the Archbishop of Canterbury. How I don't know. And he is asked by the king to make sure that this rich man leaves all his money to the crown. And so Black Adder, as the Archbishop of Canterbury, is on one side of the dying man's bed, and the Bishop of London is on the other side. And the Bishop of London says, oh, if you leave all your money to the church, think of heaven, think of the joy, think of the wonder. And Black Adder says, would you really want to be in heaven? I mean, all the things you like to do, you can't do anymore in heaven. There's no drinking, there's no wenching. I mean, do you really want to sit around in a crowd and play a harp all day? It must be incredibly tedious for someone like you. Well, the joke of it is, this episode of Black Adder really presents the Christian truth. Your walk, your Christian life, prepares you for heaven. When you're in heaven, the joys, the carnal joys, the pleasures of this world are not carried forward. Your heaven is being in the presence of a God who is so perfect, so glorious, so wonderful, that you bask in his radiance and glory. And if you get your thrills from sex and food and drinking, I'm sorry, folks, you'll probably be happier in hell. This is what Jesus is telling the Sadducees today. The Sadducees have a question. They're trying, who are the Sadducees? I mean, a little bit of that. The Sadducees I guess, were the Episcopalians of Judaism in those days. They were the beautiful people. They were the wealthy. They were the successful. They were those around the kingdom. See, the Pharisees, they were the ones who were really religiously strict and zealot and observant, and they followed all the rules. Paul was a Pharisee. The Sadducees said, we'll trust the first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and everything else we'll take as pious wisdom. And what's not in those first 5 books, we don't have to believe. So all of these Christian laws, all these Jewish laws and duties, all these responsibilities, all these things the Pharisees did, the Sadducees said, well, that's for them, that's not for us. We want to have a happy life. One of the things that does not appear directly in the Old Testament, first 5 books, is the resurrection of the dead. So the Pharisees taught that enjoy yourself right now, do as well as you can, have as much fun as you can, because when you die, that's it. You're gone. The Pharisees, of course, rejected that. And so the Sadducees, that's why Luke tells us, as we read this gospel, some Sadducees, those who say there is no resurrection, meaning he's giving people who don't know the Jewish world a little bit of hint where these guys are coming from. They say to Jesus, they ask you a question. Now, I swear this question was on an SAT test I took. Something about 2 trains, one going this way and one going that way. And if this was going that speed, how fast was the other one going? When would they meet? And then the question would be, and what was in the third caboose? The Sadducees think the whole idea of resurrection is nonsense. Heaven is nonsense. All this stuff is just a joke. And so they're going to come up with as dumb a question to show how illogical this whole belief system is. They're going to try to make Jesus look stupid. So they come up with the question. Well, Moses says that if a man dies and he's married and he has no children, his widow should marry his brother. It's one of the laws in the Old Testament. And the widow is to bear a child from her husband's brother, and that child will be raised as if it were the dead man's son. So that dead man has a progeny. His line continues. Okay, so that's Jewish law at that time. That's raised by Moses. Okay, well, then the second man dies. No kids. Then the third man dies. No kid. 4, 5, 6, 7, all die. Married widow, all die. None have children. Who was going to be the woman's husband in heaven? And Jesus responds, not by answering, oh, it was number 4, but rather to say, you guys just don't understand how heaven works. Heaven is not a continuation. Heaven is not a nice suburb of Jerusalem where the weather is beautiful all day, you can play. It's not Kentucky, folks. Where the weather is beautiful, you can play golf all day, the prices are low, and life is just one continuation of the pleasures after another. Heaven is a place where there's no marriage, because there's no eating, there's no drinking, there's no sexual congress. Because those things are not forbidden or anything, but we are so lifted up and in God's presence and power, the purposes that they once served are no longer necessary. The joys of the carnal life are as nothing compared to the joys of the spiritual life in the presence of God. So you ask, so if I ask you a question about, do you really want to go to heaven? You really have to ask yourself that, don't you? And then Jesus goes on to turn that whole premise on its head by saying, yes, God did talk about resurrection in the Old Testament, the first 5 books, and here's where. You remember the movie, Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner? 10 Commandments will be on TBS on Easter Sunday. You can watch it for 5 hours, or whatever it is. For most people in this room, I assume that's where your knowledge of the Exodus story comes from. Well, Moses, played by Charlton Heston, goes up to Sinai and seeing the California scrub oak, miraculously transported to Sinai. Burning without being consumed, he makes the same face that he made in El Cid and in the Agony of the Exodus. These are the, Charlton Heston makes a face of agony and asks who it is. What's happening? The voice says, I am who I am. Take off your shoes, you are on holy ground. Who's speaking to me? I am who I am. Say I am has sent you. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Now the Hebrew that is written in, the Hebrew language is a little more sophisticated than ours in some ways. And the Hebrew language there makes it quite clear. It's not, in English, we would make the distinction, I was the God of Abraham, I was the God of Isaac, I was the God of Jacob. Meaning Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are either dead or I'm no longer their God. But in Hebrew, it would mean they're dead. But here, God is saying, I am the God of these three people who are alive. Well, they're with me in paradise. And Jesus is pointing out this, saying, God is not the God of the dead, but the living. He is the God of the living, and those who died in the Lord are still alive. The path that Blake is going to start today is a path towards sanctification, towards holiness, so that he can be like the man that we buried yesterday. All these people stood up and shared memories and thoughts. And the thing that each of them said, one way or another, was this was a man's man. This was a guy who you could go to, who always had his hand out, who always would help, who always was there for you if you needed him. This was somebody who had reached the point where he didn't need another Cadillac. He didn't need another suit. He didn't need a this or that. His joy, his pleasure came in being a man among men and sharing his life with others. A person like that, when he enters paradise with Jesus Christ, is going to fit right in. But somebody whose life is focused on me, what's in it for me? How am I going to get there? What am I going to get? What am I going to do? Heaven is going to be a very miserable place, because it's not going to be about you. It's going to be a fulfillment of your destiny with God. But if you've not walked that walk and begun that journey towards personal holiness, it's going to be a miserable place. We really had a wonderful weekend here. It shouldn't be the other way around. We should have had a baptism yesterday and a funeral today, and it would have worked more chronologically. But I hope, friends, I want you to understand this. Life is entering a place, a public place right now, where he will be acknowledged as Christ forever. In our teaching and our understanding, my sprinkling water on his head, it's not magic. The moment the water hits his head, it doesn't happen. His justification, it could have happened already. It may happen at this moment. It may happen in the future. Adolf Hitler was baptized. I don't think it took. It never happened. This is the symbol, though, of that relationship. He is going to have to make decisions in his life. That is why we have his godparents and his parents speak for him today. They will assist him in that journey, start him off on the right path. I hope you're hearing this. Knowing that the ultimate destination is life with Jesus Christ in paradise. This is the gift that will be given. This is the joy we celebrate today. Amen. And Jim, could I ask you to run over and get the Sunday school